Part C. In this part of the test, you'll hear two different extracts. In each extract, you'll hear health professionals talking about aspects of their work. For questions 31 to 42, choose the answer A, B, or C which fits best according to what you hear. Complete your answers as you listen. Now look at Extract 1. Extract 1. Questions 31 to 36. You hear a psychiatric nurse called Marcus Enright giving a presentation on the subject of psychiatric hospitals. You now have 90 seconds to read questions 31 to 36.
Good morning, my name's Marcus Enright and I've spent most of my career working in the mental health sector. I started as a healthcare assistant and eventually qualified as a psychiatric nurse earlier this year. As a result, I've seen hundreds of patients being put through a process called sectioning. That's when patients are admitted to institutions, often against their will, and usually because they're a risk to themselves or others. One thing that's always bothered me about sectioned patients is how they almost vanish from society. As healthcare professionals, confidentiality is always at the centre of what we do, but the fallout from that is that afterwards we almost never hear from these patients or find out what it's really like for them to be living within the four walls of a psychiatric hospital. Because of this, many people see these institutions as prisons, and they're often surrounded by cameras and other high-security devices. Broadmoor Hospital in the UK even has an escape siren, which is tested weekly at 10 o'clock on Monday mornings. It's extremely loud, sounds similar to an air raid warning, and it's impossible to ignore. This kind of thing just fuels the fear and taboo surrounding psychological conditions. Not only that, but Hollywood movies tend to perpetuate hysterical stereotypes and prejudices. When news stories do emerge, they often depict patients or hospitals in a negative light, overlooking all the positive and life-changing things that can happen there. It was after an incident last year that I decided to try to change things. Together with some colleagues, I was organising a party for our patients. We called 7 local musicians who all turned us down when they discovered it was a mental health hospital. They weren't even prepared to discuss coming to play. We finally managed to find someone and thought we'd been successful with the 8th musician, but as soon as he arrived at reception and realised that he'd have to go through an access control door, he panicked, grabbed his equipment and was gone. For these people, their misconceptions about what a psychiatric hospital stood for clearly outweighed the opportunity to earn some money and experience something new. And so began my personal mission to create a podcast that would provide patients with an audible voice, while at the same time maintaining their anonymity, giving them the opportunity to shift perceptions of secure care and complex mental illness. After initial scepticism, staff were very much on board with the idea and realised it was time that we took a stand to help create sensitive and sympathetic coverage around these complex health issues. We launched the first episode 3 months ago, and over the course of 4 episodes, it's received more than 5,000 plays and so many positive reviews. Throughout each episode, I interview a variety of patients who speak candidly about what they've encountered, the challenges and the stigma they face around their illness, as well as all the positive things that have happened to them during their time in secure services. What struck me throughout this process is that while we've come a long way as a society in breaking down barriers about depression and anxiety, we still have a long way to go to demystify other conditions like schizophrenia and borderline personality disorder. For example, in one episode, a patient explained that it's actually easier for him to say to his friends and acquaintances that he's been in prison than it is to say he's been treated for his mental health condition in hospital, as it leads to fewer questions and less attention. There have also been occasions when friends and family of our patients are reluctant to visit them or have refused, because in their minds, a mental health hospital resembles a scene from a scary movie. Believe me, this is far from reality. Mental health conditions needn't be that debilitating, but in the future, if we're going to help our patients with their recovery, we need to transform outdated perceptions of how they present and of the therapies used to correct them. Challenging the media and continuing to push them to adjust their unrealistic version of life inside mental health institutions would also help to improve public understanding and acceptance. We've come a long way since the portrayal of the lunatic asylums seen in movies and on television, but my dream is that eventually this podcast will go even further and show people that, rather than being places full of horror and dread, they actually offer positive experiences and opportunities for patients to make huge progress in overcoming their illnesses.
Now look at Extract 2. Extract 2, questions 37 to 42. You hear an interview with a senior respiratory nurse called Joanna Parker, who is talking about a new project for patients with idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, IPF. You now have 90 seconds to read questions 37 to 42.
My guest today is Joanna Parker, a senior respiratory nurse who set up a new project to help patients with idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, or IPF. Joanna, could you tell us a bit about the project and what your aim was in setting it up?
Sure. IPF is a debilitating condition that affects about 33,000 people in the UK. Sadly, there's no cure, and it's a life-limiting progressive disease, characterised by a decline in lung function, so it has a dramatic and negative impact on patients' lives. They need access to palliative care and help with managing their symptoms. These services are usually delivered at regional centres, which can be a considerable distance from patients' homes. We realised that survival rates were being affected because a lot of patients couldn't manage the long trip, and that prompted the project to set up more sites. The average age of an IPF patient is 74, and many have significant comorbidities and also require oxygen therapy. So travelling can be very challenging, particularly if they're using the bus or train. Not only that, but the treatments can cause liver toxicity, so patients need monitoring every 1 to 3 months.
So how do you go about it, and what exactly did it involve?
First, we discussed our concerns with our regional IPF network and identified essential referring areas. Next, we contacted specialist nurses in those areas to find out whether they were interested in collaborating with us to set up local monitoring clinics, and the response was hugely positive. We then invited everyone who had expressed an interest to our hospital to see how our nurse-led clinic monitors patients' treatment. For example, we did one particularly valuable workshop on managing the side effects of medication, which include gastrointestinal disturbance, photosensitivity and fatigue. Our nurses' knowledge and experience was shared, so more staff are now in a position to set up new clinics.
And have there been any pleasant or interesting surprises?
Well, a key feature of the project has been the introduction of telephone clinics, and we've found that these have been absolutely pivotal for operation across the region. Without them, patients wouldn't be able to get the specialist support they need. They've also meant that patients are referred far more quickly and can utilise services such as palliative care when they really need them. But we were kind of expecting that. I think the most positive outcome, and one that was totally unanticipated, has been the dramatic rise in adherence to the antifibrotic education. It seems that the extra support has made all the difference. Also, in a snapshot survey we did, there was a unanimous response that the patients themselves prefer the new local monitoring sites and see them as very valuable.
And have there been any problems associated with the new project?
Well, it's not perfect. The nurse-led telephone clinics do mean that consultations can take place from the comfort of the patient's own home, and that's wonderfully convenient. That said, given their typical age and pre-existing conditions, some patients do struggle to catch everything that the nurses are saying. But otherwise, I'd say it's extremely effective. It doesn't allow anybody to fall through the net. We introduced an IPF nursing team's secure email account so that patients could access help and support from us 5 days per week. This is in addition to telephone contact. So even though the support isn't given in person as such, it's still very much tailored to individual patients.
Do you have any plans to take the project further, or are you going to leave it at that?
Looking ahead, we'd like to expand the model across the country. That would mean developing the network of healthcare professionals involved, finding out about other available resources in the area, and expanding our clinic provision further. We've also created a structured care pathway for staff to use with patients throughout the disease trajectory, and we're hoping to start rolling that out in the near future. This is really exciting, as it aims to provide health professionals with evidence-based steps to follow, ensuring all patients receive equitable, high-quality care at each phase of the disease. It should have a huge impact on patient outcomes.
And finally, what advice would you give to anyone considering setting up a similar project in their region?
Well, you need to take it one step at a time, drawing up a protocol document with shared information about patient demographics, pulmonary function tests, schedule monitoring, etc. at the beginning is vital, as it offers extra support and enables people involved in the project to make informed decisions independently and quickly. Nurses report being more fulfilled too, mainly because it's made referral decisions easier and everyone's knowledge of local patient services has improved. And finally, remember that the secret to success is communication.
That is the end of Part C. You now have 2 minutes to check your answers.